Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Gita, Memoirs of a Psychiatrist. I have been looking forward to this particular episode for some time now because it was what made me get into this in the first place.
Oh, it was your hook. It was what hooked you, yeah.
I grew up in a family that was fairly religious, a Hindu family, very religious, with a lot of rituals and semantics and going to the temple and doing prayers and stuff like that. My mother was extremely ritualistic and an honest, decent, very kind person with a lot of knowledge of mythology, Hindu mythology, but not being able to explain, other than the symbolic meanings of what this meant, the deeper levels of what I have now learned, thanks to my wife having pointed me towards the Gita and Gautam Jain, going back many, many, many years ago. Until that time, as a child, when I was growing up, I learned about Hinduism and the concept of God at home, from my mother, from my aunts, usually the females in the family, the women. The men were too rajasic and out to work. But I used to go to school in India, which was a British colony until the late 1940s. And in school, it was usually missionary schools, which spoke English, taught us English, and the teachers and the prayers were of Christian nature. So we would say Christian prayers, "O God, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name," that kind of stuff.
Right.
So there was a lot of Christian kind of teachings in school to us. So I would learn the Christian beliefs in school, come back and hear the Hindu beliefs. Neither one actually contradicted or put down the other. There was mutual getting along. But in school, the concept was that there is one God up in the sky. That was, and bear with me, friends, because I'm sure that some of you, if not all of you, have had the same thoughts, that God and I are separate.
Yes.
God is up in the sky. I am here. I am supposed to follow the will of God. God will direct me and show me the path to where I'm supposed to go. But really, whatever I do is the will of God.
Right.
And if I do good, which is another part I didn't understand, that if God is going to show me the way and tell me what to do, then why will God punish me if I do something bad? Right? I never understood that. You say, I do something bad, then God is going to punish me.
There's a concept in Christianity called free will.
Free will, okay.
God shows you the way, but you still have the choice to make on your own.
You have the choice, okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was the concept that, God will show me the way, I will do good things and I will get rewarded and I'll go to heaven.
Right.
If I do bad things, then I go to hell.
Right.
And God will punish me. And I also didn't understand that concept, that why is God so, if God is all merciful, then why will God punish me? That was another concept. At home, I learned another concept, and that's what I want to talk about today, because as I grew older and I became more scientific, I started not believing in God. I stopped doing rituals, stopped doing prayers, and said, as a scientist, none of this makes sense to me.
Right.
Until one fateful day when my wife said to me, you've got to go to the temple and you've got to listen to this person. His name is Gautam Jain. He gives lectures on the Gita. And I said, I don't want to go. I think I've told the story again, but I cannot tell it often enough. She said, do it for my sake. And I said, fine, I'll go. She never asked me for anything, so I said, fine. I went that one time. She said, if you don't like it, you never have to go again. I went, it changed my life. Since then, the first time I went, I felt like I was in a dirty car going through a car wash and came out after the lecture saying, oh my God, I can't believe this was so good. This is exactly what I needed. From then on, Gautam said I was like a shadow to him. I was going to every lecture I could go to. And it was just so fascinating. And Gautam is great. Gautam is fantastic. I have since then studied and looked at other people and their writings and their teachings and have learned so much from the scriptures. One of the concepts I learned about is what is God? Who is God? What is the Vedantic explanation of God? And that's what I wanted to get across to you, to our friends and people. So in Vedanta, firstly, there is no do's and don'ts. You know how in today's Christianity, and I differentiate between today's Christianity and what Jesus taught, okay? There's a difference between what Jesus taught and what is in the Bible today. And that's a whole other topic that we need to, again, thanks to my wife who gave me this article on the Gnostic Gospels.
Yep.
The Gnostic Gospels are what Jesus and his disciples first promulgated, and they talked about how one is to lead one's life. There were no churches at the time, so it didn't tell you to go to church, didn't tell you to do rituals, didn't tell you to do anything, but basically very Vedantic concepts of how to lead one's life towards one's fellow human being.
Right.
Christ taught the same sort of things, as Gita says. Whatever you do, your actions should be for the benefit of others. Isn't that what we just said in the last episode?
Yes.
Whatever you do, do for the welfare of others without being self-centered, self-motivated. And I saw a BBC documentary on Jesus that said, you know, the 13 years, Lou, he was missing, Jesus, he was in India.
Oh.
That's what the BBC documentary says. He was studying under the Verdantic teachers in India and came back with a lot of these things. And the Gnostic Gospels basically talks about Vedantic principles. And then 400 years after his death, Bishop, what's his name? Bishop Athanasius. Okay. Athanasius changed everything to make it more self-centered for himself and his relatives and the church, be that as it may.
Yes.
In Christianity, early Christianity, there were no do's and don'ts. It didn't say, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not lie, all those 10 commandments, stuff like that. Similarly, in Vedanta, in the Vedas, Upanishads, there are none. What it tells you in the Vedas is that you have to develop your intellect to be able to discern and to decide what is right and what is wrong. So if you obviously, it says don't kill unnecessarily, whether it's a cow or a pig or a goat or a human being, don't kill. But if you happen to be in a restaurant and there's a terrorist there just shooting randomly and you see him, it looks like he's going to kill everybody, you use your intellect and say, this guy needs to be taken out. So you do whatever it takes, including possibly killing him, to stop him from doing his bad things. And Vedanta will not say you did the wrong thing by doing that. As we see with Krishna and Arjuna, where Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to fight, to kill the really evil people, the Kauravas. Similarly, it doesn't say you may not lie. So Gautam Jain gives a very good example of, he says, suppose you're sitting in a classroom teaching, and a woman is running by and she rushes into your classroom and says, there's 7 people out there looking to kill me. Hide me, please, before they kill me. And you say, okay, go in that closet and hide. Close the door. 5 minutes later, these 7 guys come up with machetes in their hand. And you say, did you see a woman running by here? And you say, yeah, I think she went down that way. And you direct them somewhere else. You told a lie.
Right.
But you told it because it was the right reason. So it's okay to tell a lie under those circumstances. So the next thing that we have to understand that the concept, even the name God, gets confusing because, for me anyway, growing up thinking God was a person who is a man up in the sky, every time I use the word God, it makes me think of that God that I grew up with.
Yep.
Whereas Vedanta gives it different names. It's called Sat, Chit, and Anand. Sat, Chit, Anand. Sat means existence. Chit means consciousness, and bliss. Chit means bliss, everlasting happiness and bliss. Sat Chit Anand, consciousness, existence, consciousness, and bliss. It also gives it other names. It says Atman and Brahman. So you remember we talked about if you have a pot, there is space inside that pot.
Right.
That space calls itself pot space. But you break the pot, that pot space comes out and becomes one with a space all over, going all the way up to infinity. Right. And it says, whoa, look at me, how big I am. I'm part of this big space. That's now its bigger space. Atman and Brahman are the same. Brahman is all over, everywhere, across the universe. But when that Brahman comes inside me, as my body over here, that small piece of Brahman is called Atman. It's the same thing, Atman and Brahman. So but over here today, I would like to use the term consciousness to talk about it, because when I say God, even in myself, as I say it, I get the vision of God up in the sky, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah.
So the scriptures talk about clay a lot. It's used as an analogy where you say clay is a substance which then gets made into a pot. And clay is a substance that gets made into a saucer or a plate.
Right.
It also talks about, scriptures also talk about gold. Gold in liquid form compared to gold if you shape it in the form of a beautiful crown that's put on the head of Queen Elizabeth, right? Diamonds all over and the gold crown. Same gold, you make into a form of a very beautiful necklace with beads and carvings and things like that. And same gold made into bangles on the Queen's arms. Crown, necklace, and bangles. Mm-hmm. All are gold, but all have a different name. Crown, necklace, bangles.
Right.
All have a different appearance. The crown looks different from the necklace looks different from the bangles. All have a different function. Mm-hmm. The crown is to be put on the head to designate this is a queen. The necklace has a function, I guess, to make the neck look more pretty, and the bangles have a function. To look pretty and make noise as she's moving her hands, etc. But in and of itself, all these crown, necklace, and bangles are all gold. The necklace doesn't know that, neither does the crown or the bangle. But it says, I'm a necklace, I'm a crown, look at me, I'm better than you.
Yeah.
But really, they're all gold. Without gold, none of them exist. The gold can exist without being a necklace or a crown or a bangle. But the crown and the necklace and the bangle cannot exist without gold. Similarly, a clay, you make it into a pot. The pot is nothing but clay. The top is clay, the bottom is clay, the inside is clay, the outside is clay. You may call it pot, but it really is clay. We, as human beings, I'm now taking this to the next level, are essentially Brahman, or Atman. We are the self, we are Atman, we are the Brahman. We may look like Lou or John or somebody else. We may speak Chinese, we may speak Russian, we may speak English. We may function a certain way, we may build houses or we may treat patients, but we are still Brahman. We cannot exist, just like the necklace cannot exist without gold. Without we take away gold, there's no necklace. You take away Brahman, there's no doctor, there's no Chinese guy, there's no Russian guy, there's nothing. We are all existing purely because of Brahman. So the Vedanta goes one step further and says, then you're all really a substrata of Brahman. You are like the hair coming out of the scalp of a person. That scalp hair is dependent on that person. Without that person, the hair doesn't belong. Without you, without Brahman, we don't belong. It's very deep. I'm giving you the most superficial level, but the important concept here to get across is Roop, Nam, Vyavhara, which is appearance or form, name, and function. So we said without the gold, there's no crown, no necklace, no bangle. Without Brahman, there's none of us, not just human beings, but all living beings. Each living being has a different name, a different form, a different appearance, different function. So just like gold is not stuck to the ornaments, Brahman is not stuck to us, right? So without us, Brahman exists, but we cannot exist without the Brahman. I'm saying that again and again, and I'm sorry to be repetitive, but it's important to know.
Right.
In us, human beings, we have 4 states. We only recognize 3 of those states. The waking state, the dream state, the deep sleep state, and a 4th state that is described in the Upanishads but given a name only by Shankaracharya. And he calls that the 4th state. And the reason that is important to mention, that 4th state is known as Turiya. Turiya being the 4th state. It was confusing in the beginning because I always thought of it as a 4th state. But the Upanishads explain that is not really the 4th state. It is in and of itself the only state.
Yes.
by thinking about it as the fourth state, you think, okay, so you go from deep sleep into the fourth state. No. Without that fourth state, you don't have a waking state. You don't have a dream state. You don't have a deep sleep state. Even though it's called the fourth state, mistakenly by Shankaracharya, in my opinion, the fourth state is in and of everything. Without that Brahman, without that Atman, without that fourth state, you don't wake up, you don't sleep, you don't dream. So what is the waking state? In that waking state, you need the consciousness to be able to do anything and everything you're doing. You can't smell without the consciousness. You can't hear, you can't speak. So if my wife were to, if I'm doing something and I'm not paying attention, my wife calls my name once, twice, and I keep thinking, I'm not listening. I am hearing her, right? In medicine, you learn about how the sound waves travel through your ear, through the nerve, takes it to the certain part of the brain, and you say, whoa, I heard something. Here, all of that is taking place, but my consciousness is not paying attention. So even though I'm hearing her, until she may say, which she doesn't, but she may say, are you deaf? I've been calling you for 10 times. What's wrong with you? My consciousness wasn't paying attention, right? So we see this with children all the time. You call them or you say, can you find my watch? I left it somewhere. And they say, I looked everywhere. I don't see it. And it's right there in front of you. Your eyes saw it, but your mind didn't grasp it. Now, the mind is based upon consciousness. So consciousness, our consciousness, enlivens the mind. You cannot think without the mind. You cannot think without the consciousness. Mind and thought is dependent on that consciousness. So also all your senses, your intellect, everything is dependent on that. It makes us love, it makes us calculate, etc. That's in the waking state. In the dream state, so going back to the waking state has a subject, which is me, and an object, which is everything else around me outside. In the dream state also, and this is important, in the dream state also, there is a subject and an object. And the subject is whoever you are as the dreamer in the dream life. And the object is whatever dream objects your mind has made about. So you may think that you're running after some object in the dream. You, as you're running, is the subject. That object that you're running after is the object. Somebody wrote to me recently and said, does that mean that all the dreams I have of my dead relatives, is it not true that my dead relatives are coming into my mind and giving me suggestions and telling me about what's to come? No. Your dreams are pure manufacturing the dreams. Your dreams are coming from your own mind, not from anybody outside. No relatives who have passed or died are producing your dreams. Make sure that those superstitions are put out of your mind. A lot of people say these dreams are because of that. It's purely from your mind. That's the dream state. And in deep sleep state, you know how you sleep so soundly, you don't know anything. You wake up and somebody says, were you asleep? I was so sound asleep. I didn't know anything. I know I had a great sleep. Now, you're talking about I. There's no subject in that deep sleep. There's no object. Where's that I? That I is the consciousness. That consciousness knows that I was fast asleep. So that's the deep sleep. There's no subject, there's no object. So each of us has an individual consciousness. Lou, you have a consciousness, I have a consciousness. Every one of the billions of people in this world have a consciousness. When we are in our dream state, we have a consciousness also. If you put it together, that's known as a cosmic consciousness. Each one of us has an individual consciousness, and Vedanta says the individual consciousness is known as Vyasti, and the cosmic consciousness is known as Samasti. So each one of us put together, that whole big cosmic consciousness is known as God in Vedanta. It's a huge cosmic consciousness, which also includes all of the illusions, quote unquote, that we talk about. You know, we talked about everything being just part of what Brahman has made as a not God. That is all Maya, illusion. So imagine that a man is in a house. The shutters are closed, everything is closed, And then he goes and he opens up these shutters and he starts transacting with the outside world.
Right.
As he starts transacting with the outside world, the whole day goes by, sun starts to set, he closes the shutters, locks everything, goes inside and starts watching TV. And he watches TV for a few hours, and then he turns off the TV and goes inside his dark bedroom and goes to sleep. That is essentially what happens in the waking state, dream state, and deep sleep state. Opening the shutters, transacting with the world is the waking state.
Right.
Closing the shutters and watching what's on TV is your dream state. Your mind is still functioning, you're watching TV,
right,
but nothing else from the outside world. It's inside your home by yourself. Then you even turn off the TV, you go inside the bedroom, you know nothing, you're asleep. That's the deep sleep state. So the dream world is a shadow of the waking world. Our attention is drawn inwards to the internal object. The waking state in Sanskrit is known as Vishwa, and the dream state is known as Taijasa. Taijasa means the fiery one. And in Buddhism, they take fire and they go around in a circle. They take it around like that. So the fiery one is, which is the dream. The deep sleep state is given a lot of importance and has multiple names. It's called Pragyaha. Pragyaha means deep sleep. Consciousness has no desires. No desires. We have no desires in deep sleep state.
Right.
But those desires are actually generated in the deep sleep state, because that's the causal state. That's where your vasanas are born, in that deep sleep state. It does not dream. It's also known as sushupti, deep sleep. In waking state, there's a subject and an object. In dream state, there's a subject and an object. In deep sleep state, pragyaha, all is merged into one. It's similar to a seed, right?
Yeah.
Take a seed, you put it in the ground. After it emerges, from that comes roots, stem, leaves, flowers, everything.
Right.
Where was all that? In that small little seed? Yes, it was all in that small little seed. Similarly, in the deep sleep state, everything that comes out later, the dreams world, the waking world, is all in that deep sleep. It's a seed. Everything's in there. So if you take that to the larger concept of the universe, you take that to God. God has a deep sleep state. And in that deep sleep state is where God causes the birth of the universe and things happening. So we often say Big Bang Theory, where did it come? Where did this happen? It happens during the deep sleep state of this Brahman. And during the waking state, there's interaction going on. During the dream state, other things. That's more complicated, harder to understand than even what this is.
Yep.
But just take that for what it's worth. So, getting towards the end, Lou.
Yeah.
There's an example that Swami gave from the Chinmayananda order that talks about a father taking a son to a movie. This is a father in the northern villages of the Himalayas. He's never been to a movie before, the kid.
Yep.
The father has only been once or twice. And he says, we have to walk a long distance to get to the little village where there's a movie theater. He says, I went once or twice before and I saw this movie. And the son says, Dad, what is it? What is it, Father? Tell me. And he said, well, son, there's a big white projector like a screen up there on the wall. And then there's something else that projects a movie onto it. And you see the movie. There's people moving and singing and dancing.
Right.
And he says, okay, let's go, let's go. So they walk. They finally get to the movie, according to the Swami. And the movie's already started. They're late. And the son says, wow, for the first few minutes, he's enthralled by what he sees on the screen. Then he says, Dad, I see this moving and people are talking, they're dancing. Where's the screen you mentioned? And he says,
yeah.
Screen's right there. What are you talking about? He says, where? He says, that's that screen up there. He says, Dad, I see a movie. I don't see a screen.
Right.
What this Swamiji was saying is that we are like that. We see the movie. We see everything around us in this world. We don't see the Brahman on which this is projected.
Right.
And this analogy we'll come back to again and again, because that screen and movie analogy fits so beautifully.
Oh, it's a wonderful analogy, yeah.
So Vedanta says awareness itself without any object is God. Awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Consciousness without any object is God. When you mix it with God and the object, then that becomes an object. You only see it as that. Vedanta says the Upanishads start with neti, neti, means not this, not this. it talks about everything and says, no, it's not this, no, it's not this, no, it's not this, because it's hard to describe. You cannot describe the Brahman. You cannot see it, you cannot perceive it, you cannot think of it, you can only become Brahman.
Right. You can't describe Brahman without making it an object, which is against the whole point.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's why, as we said in the previous episode, that Brahman has no function of its own. It can enliven other things to function, but without that other object, Brahman is, as Shankaracharya put it, useless.
Right.
Brahman cannot do anything, needs something else. So without the underlying consciousness, this fourth state of Turiya, none of these things that follow are possible. Seeing, thinking, smelling, feeling, understanding, remembering, loving, but by itself, consciousness does not enter into any transaction. So we've gone a long time with this. How long has it been, Lou?
About 28 minutes.
Oh, not bad. I thought it's a lot longer. But anyway, it's deep compared to what you will see in the Gita. And it's a deeper explanation. This is directly from the Upanishads. But it's important for us to know, because as we do the Gita, you may say, why are we studying this Gita? What is it? And what we are learning today is, if this is the Brahman, we are suffering. One of the things I want to talk about in one of these sessions is, what is suffering and why do we suffer and how can we get past? Suffering meaning a loved one dies, you lose your job, a child of yours, God forbid, dies. You think about these things and how can I get past this? And this is what this Gita is all about, is to get back to Brahman, to get past this suffering, to get to the point where you are everlasting bliss, and how to get there. Now, in order to get there, you've got to do all the things that it talks about in the Gita. Very simple things, to control your desires so that your mind is free of the desires, and your mind can then focus on meditation so that you can become closer to God. You don't have to be self-realized. You don't have to get there. Most people get discouraged, say, I'm never going to be self-realized. And maybe you're not in this lifetime anyway. But at least if you move even a fraction, as I felt myself move, even a fraction towards that, you see great changes, great benefits to yourself. And you won't know it until you actually practice it. You won't see it. It's like saying going to the gym when you're 16 and you're skinny, and you say, go to the gym. I promise you, you will develop muscles and you'll feel fit. Similarly, I can promise you, you practice this, costs you nothing. Just means you just have to pay attention to what you're doing, and you will feel the benefits. So, folks, thank you for listening. Lou, thanks for putting this together. And I hope to see you next week.
This episode, the last episode, was fascinating. Find us on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, and, of course, on Facebook, on Gita, Memoirs of a Psychiatrist. Catch these last two episodes especially, if you haven't. And we'll see you next time.